Well, welcome to another week's analysis behind the news. Now, those of you who watch these videos regularly know that I usually talk about the news and give some background to understand what is happening. Either that or simply make apparent the logical or illogical aspect of what's being reported. Well, this week I'm going to be doing something a little different. This week I want to take this opportunity to pass along a warning about something we've been witnessing. It is the attempt by some very astute communists to misdirect the entire constitutionalist movement in the future by ingratiating themselves into the minds of many conservatives today. Now, part of this is the growing viewership of something called RT television by Ron Paul supporters and other conservatives, and it is disconcerting. It's happening because RT is one of the very few broadcasters that treat the Paul campaign with fairness. RT, of course, stands for Russia Today, Putin's propaganda initiative not only into the United States but the entire world. We feel that they are covering Paul's campaign in this manner precisely because they want to first gain the trust of Ron Paul's followers as a fair and unbiased news source in order to misdirect them in the future. Too many of Paul's younger supporters did not live through the period of overt communist brutality, and they have no appreciation for their duplicity. RT has programs aimed at 100 countries, claiming that even though they are financed by the Russian government, they have an unbiased editorial policy. Sure, just about as much as PBS is unbiased. PBS in the United States has some good programs too, but their editorial policy is left-wing. Just to give you an idea, RT television is spending billions of dollars around the world to build that television network up. And that does not bode well when you consider the fact that they are today, in their coverage, in their scope, in their reach, bigger than CNN. Now, in every one of these countries that RT broadcasts into, they have programs designed to ingratiate themselves with the local people. You can imagine what they do not carry in pro-American broadcasting in Latin America or the Middle East. In other words, it's not pro-America outside the United States. Since the majority of governments in Latin America are run by communists, you can well imagine that the RT broadcasts are designed to support these governments. In fact, we have lots of instances in this regard in the Spanish language broadcasts into South America. For instance, this one saying that Cuba and the United States needs to get back together again, and that the United States is just bullying Cuba, the communist country there. In fact, we even find out that in one case, one of the countries that we're supporting, both militarily in the war on terror and the war on drugs, Colombia, its president, Juan Manuel Santos, has said that he will help facilitate Cuba and the United States getting together. This is the kind of thing that you read in the Latino broadcast, but not in the United States. Now, Russia Today changed its image to using the term RT, rather than Russia Today, to initially throw people off rejecting their television station at first glance. After all, why would anyone want to believe what Russian television has to say? RT sounds a lot better than Russia Today. And once you get used to their reporting, many do not seem to mind who is broadcasting the news. We have no real data concerning what and where this will all lead, only that it does not bode well if too many good people start to believe everything that they see and hear from this relatively new source for the news. When Moscow starts telling the truth, you can bet they have something in mind once they get a fairly sizable number of American conservatives tuning in. Sadly, there are those who claim to be very astute, yet they recommend these broadcasts as if they are better than Fox or CNN. We even see conservatives appearing on RT We have, in the John Birch Society, refused to give interviews to RT because we know what it is. But other conservatives have not. They've gone ahead and given interviews. We've witnessed too many initiatives by the communists that have taken good conservatives off focus, doing things that, even if they are successful, will not defeat the insiders who intend to rule us. They are designed to busy people who are concerned about our country doing things that will, in the end, be ineffective relative to saving the Constitution and our independence of the American people. By busy, I mean getting them busy doing things that are ineffective. Some get very emotional about these issues to the point that they feel that if someone is more interested in anything besides their issue, somehow they are traitors. I've had that thrown in my face. Let us bring some perspective to this subject without disparaging anyone or their paramount issue of concern. There are three issues which, if we lose them, our free country could well be lost. They are, number one, getting us out of the United Nations. That is the end of the New World Order crowd. That's the end they have in mind for the future world government. If we get the USA to pull its membership, the whole house of cards called the United Nations will collapse. The United Nations is behind Agenda 21 and so many initiatives that are attempting to hamstring our industry and our agriculture. The second one is the North American Union. If we merge with Canada and Mexico, as the CFR claims it does not want, but nonetheless is pushing us toward, then we will have lost our say as an independent people about everything. The Constitution will have been abrogated. After a few years of inactivity, this issue is coming back. And we've seen that in this last week. Only this time, it's even more hidden from the American people. The third thing is that if we lose our local police system, where the local police are beholden to the local citizens, and they become integrated into a national police system, then it will set the stage for a totalitarian government. No totalitarian government can exist with a system of local police answerable to their local citizens. They must have a national police force. Any one of these three things coming to their full fruition, and we could lose our freedom. The UN, the North American Union, and a national police force. Ask yourself, what other organization besides the John Birch Society is even working on these agenda to get us out of the UN, to stop the North American Union, and to support our local police and keep them independent? I do not mean talk about it. I mean working on them. You know the answer. Oh, and be very suspicious of people who promote RT and attack the idea of not supporting your local police. We have to concentrate on getting more people involved in this agenda by getting more people to join the John Birch Society. Do all you can to get your chapters working toward building up your local membership. But let me just add one other thing here, and that is the things that we can learn from looking at RT outside the United States. For instance, now we see that Russia has allowed a NATO base to be built in the city where Lenin was born. Now everybody thinks that NATO was supposed to fight Russian communism, and Russia is against NATO supplying Iraq and Afghanistan and all the rest of it. But here is Russia opening up a base, and by the way, will be run by the Russians for NATO, on Russian soil, for NATO to supply these other areas that they're fighting in the Middle East. Now, does that make sense to you? Well, it makes sense to me, because all of this is a charade anyway. All of this is designed for a master plan of getting us involved more and more overseas, until we wake up one day and find out that we've lost our own neighborhood. For instance, in yesterday's New York Times, on the front page, was a major article about how China is moving into the Caribbean with lots of money that they made from the United States to start buying influence in all these Caribbean areas. We are becoming surrounded by the Chinese and the Russians and through the communist empire in Latin America, while all of our people are overseas. It does not bode well for the future. The American people must be subjugated. If they cannot subjugate the American people from within, then they're going to have another war to get people to stand still for an awful lot of draconian regulations and hardships, and maybe even a new form of government. That's what's really going on in the general foreign policy scheme when you tie all of this stuff together. And one last thing, there's another one called Russia Beyond the Headlines. Russia Beyond the Headlines, which is run by the newspaper of record for the Russian government. They have ties now where the Washington Post and the New York Times are actually running articles for the Russians from this particular network. Watch for these things. They're trying to get a lot of propaganda aimed at the American people. Till next week, we'll see you then.